I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's a glorious fall day on campus. It's about 77 degrees out right now, and things are tuning up for a really big weekend on campus. What will be, in essence, our fourth home game in a row. We considered last week's Shamrock Series game in Chicago home, and it was a glorious victory over Wisconsin. And thank you for joining us, so many of you taking over the city and feeling the impact there. And wonderful to come back to a top 10 matchup against the Cincinnati Bearcats this weekend. Weather should be warm. We may have some spotty showers come game time. That's touch and go right now, but we really look forward to welcoming you back to campus, those of you who can make it, and the others I'm sure will be joining us via the NBC broadcast. A quick COVID update, which hopefully will be growing more obsolete as we move forward. We only had one positive case on campus last week from a few thousand tests. And so the positivity rate is well under 1%. So we're feeling very fortunate and grateful that there's been such a high vaccination rate on campus, and it's making a huge difference. Again, for those coming back for games, we ask you to please be fully vaccinated and to follow all safety protocols for these weekends, which means wearing masks when you're indoors. And again, anybody at all times, wear your mask if it makes you feel more comfortable. We've been very fortunate after the first two home football weekends, not seeing any spike in cases through those weekends. So people have been following protocols. So thank you for that. It's my distinct pleasure now to introduce the chair of the Notre Dame Board of Trustees, Jack Brennan, who is beginning his 6th year of chair of the board. He is currently the chairman emeritus and former CEO of Vanguard, one of the world's largest investment companies. He has an undergraduate degree from Dartmouth College and his MBA from Harvard. His wife, Kathy, also has degrees from Dartmouth and then a graduate degree from the Harvard School of Education. And they have three children who are all Notre Dame graduates. Will began the tradition, graduated in 2006, Kara in 2008, and Connor in 2011. So Jack, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule and joining us today. And let's start out to kind of get to know a little bit about where you've come from. Where did you grow up? What was family life like in those early years, and just a little bit of color from your background?
Sure, Lou. First, thanks for having me. Fun to be here. Great to be with the Notre Dame family virtually. Thank you, too, by the way, for doing these all through COVID. It was been a great way for those of us who couldn't get to campus to feel like we could get there. So bravo to you, Lou, and the team that makes this happen. You know, the short story for me is I grew up in a first-generation American parents. All my grandparents came from Ireland. My one grandfather died young. My other grandfather was actually the janitor at the Harvard Divinity School. So my father grew up in the dorm, in the dorm at Harvard Divinity School as a janitor's kid. My mother was a cook, so she always grew up in somebody else's home. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have been born into that family. You know, so they're real. My parents are real first-gen people. I've got a brother and two sisters. We're still incredibly close. We see each other all the time on Cape Cod, even though we'd been scattered, and now we try to gather as often as we can. But you know, I look back and say, after moving out of closer to Boston, we moved to a town called Winchester, Mass, a wonderful middle-class suburb with a lot of middle-class families. But you know, having parents like we did, was a great gift, really, in so many ways. You know, they were role models for faith, for hard work, for giving back. My father went to Boston College, and he used to tell us their motto is be the best. Not sure that's true, but it worked for him. And that mattered. And so it was a disciplined household, right? You You didn't miss mass. You did your homework. You had chores. You had part-time jobs. You had summer jobs. And it was a great way to grow up. The last point I'd just say is, sports, much like Notre Dame, were really important to us, whether it was Little League or eventually other sports that, really taught us so much, the boys and the girls on the playing fields, and were important to us. All four of us had the privilege of playing college sports. My sister at Georgetown, my other sister at Trinity College in Washington, and my brother at Dartmouth as well. So kind of hard to beat. I tell people all the time, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and it started on July 29th, 1954, being born into that family.
That's fantastic. Well, you're characteristically modest, so I'm going to brag a little bit about the fact that you were an All-American lacrosse player and also a hockey player, a star hockey player at Dartmouth. And then afterwards, you were very much engaged in rugby. And you had a little visit to Notre Dame during your rugby days. You might want to recount that story.
I'd like to correct the adjectives on hockey and lacrosse player at Dartmouth. So I was a hockey and lacrosse player at Dartmouth. Let's start with that. Okay. So we'll correct. I know you're Italian and you take some liberty with descriptions, but no, my first visit to Notre Dame was actually playing for a club rugby team against the undergrads, and someone who I've always described as a frustrated football player. A pile drove me into the ground, blew away this shoulder. I played the rest of the half with one arm, thinking I could fake my teammates into thinking I wasn't badly hurt, and ended up in Memorial Hospital where they were about to operate on me. And Kathy basically said, "We don't even know where we are. We just moved to Chicago." And my parting words were, "If I never see this place again, as long as I live, I'll be a happy man."
So that's quite a first impression. I'm glad
it was quite a first. I didn't even like driving by South Bend on the way home to New England for Christmas or Easter.
It's pretty amazing how this has come full circle. So tell us, you and Kathy, both Dartmouth and Harvard grads, and coming from modest backgrounds, but steeped in that Ivy League tradition, you send all three kids to Notre Dame. How does that happen?
Well, listen, the summary statement is it's the greatest thing that ever happened to our family. So let me just put that as the wrapper. Frankly, Will, our oldest, wanted to be his own man and didn't want to follow in his parents' footsteps. We had a neighbor who said, well, if that's the case, he has to look at Notre Dame. Came out and saw a football game, said, "I want to go to Notre Dame." One of my great colleagues at Vanguard said, "You can't let a kid go to a football game." And she's a grad and go to Notre Dame. You got to take him out in February, which I took him out on a tour in February, and he said, "This is the place for me." And, so he came, talk a little bit about that experience, but Kara said, "I'm in." We explained to her, you actually have to apply and get accepted. And then number three, Connor said, "I'll go anywhere but Dartmouth or Notre Dame." Can you imagine anything more like a red flag in front of a bull to his two siblings? And I still remember, we're playing Penn State for the first time at home in years in 2006. Next thing you know, my tickets are gone, and they are bringing Connor out to recruit him. And it was just wholly unacceptable that he didn't have Notre Dame as his first pick. And long story short, when he came home from that game, suddenly the application for early action was filled out and submitted. And it was fun to watch, actually. That was special. Your kid, you never know how your kids are going to be together. But the fact that the older two just said, "This is the place for him and we want him here." And, many years later now, you look and you say, what a gift, right? To have them have that together. Our two daughters-in-law are grads, and it's a special thing. And it was luck in many ways, again, I'd say. But credit to Will for starting the parade, and for the rest of them for keeping it going.
No, thank God for Will. I mean, he was the pioneer, and he not only chose to come to Notre Dame, but he brought the whole family with him, including his parents ultimately. And that wasn't an easy decision for you, right? I mean, Will had some some health challenges as a young kid, and you were concerned that of where he would go, having a medical center close by. Can you, anything you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's obviously it's your first child in any case, and then
Yeah.
it's a child with some who's had a medical history and healthy, but you never know. And
Mhm.
frankly, many of the people who'd cared for him since he was a couple of weeks old were very hesitant to have him go to other than a major city, Chicago
Yeah.
or New York or Philly or Boston or someplace. And he was determined. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you, the university responded in a way that was incredible. You know, we explained the situation, and they gave us so much comfort that this would be fine.
Yeah.
That we came back and talked to the woman who was really the key doctor for him, and she said, "Go for it, go
Mhm.
for it." You know, if something bad happens, it's 90 minutes to Chicago. But it was actually the even before he got here, Lou, the warmth and the wrapper of the
Mhm.
Notre Dame team saying, "We want this kid here,
Mhm.
and we'll make it work."
Yeah.
And obviously they did. And, you know, it's another thing we're incredibly grateful for, because he might have been somewhere else and that had been less caring people. And listen, he had a couple of stints in the hospital, uh,
Mhm.
and, you know, his roommate sat by his side, and, you know, it's just stuff that are, they're classic Notre Dame stories.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, in some ways, a leap of faith and great courage and tenacity on Will's part, and you guys accepting, his determination is a great family story. You've shared a little bit about that orientation weekend, and in particular, the mass in the basketball arena, the Purcell Pavilion now, and you talked a little bit about something that Monk had to share in his homily and his charge to the class. Could you recount that, your memory of that?
Sure. I'll recount. It's funny. I'm going to recount Monk, then I'm going to tell you something else, if that's okay. I thought we might talk
Please,
about
please.
this. So, you know, Father Malloy gets up. He's the president of this great university, and he says, I'm paraphrasing, uh, listen, it's so great to have you all here. For some, this has been a life dream to come to Notre Dame. For others, it's a recent thing. And, you know, there are some of you who are here because we're recognized as a great university, with, among others. And he said, essentially, you know, that's nice, but that's not what motivates us. And at least in my eyes, you know, I stopped dead to listen. And he said, listen, we're motivated by other things. We're motivated by taking you and helping you grow as young adults and sending you out in the world to make a difference, to be people of character, of values, of faith,
Mhm.
of a willingness to get involved and give back and help and solve problems in society.
Mhm.
That's what motivates Notre Dame. It's not US News rankings. It's not comparisons to other schools. I was totally blown away by it.
Mm.
Obviously, I can pretty much recount it 19
Yeah,
years later.
yeah.
And the funny part is, we're our building at Vanguard's getting renovated, so I had to clean out files for the first time in 40 years, which is pretty tough. And in I have this Notre Dame folder I use for Notre Dame stuff, and in it I have. Do you mind if I read a quick letter I sent to Monk?
No, please, please.
Because I think it says a lot about what most of us as parents, grads or not, have experienced. So after the graduation, I said, "Dear President Malloy, I'm writing to say a loud thanks on behalf of my wife and myself for the terrific freshman orientation program your team put on this weekend. Everything was first rate. We left South Bend convinced that our son Will had indeed made the perfect choice of schools. The combination of academics, humanity, and spirituality displayed in the formal and informal sessions was really inspirational. As we left town, we wondered whether anyone ever takes a minute to thank you for making the transition from home to college, our first, so positive for both the parents and the student. I hope lots of people do, but if not, count our voices as loud enough for the whole class. We're very grateful." It was fun to find this letter. I'd remembered sending it, but hadn't seen it in a long time. But it really did capture. And listen, we felt the same way when Kara went, and the same way when
Mhm.
Connor went. It was,
Mhm.
you're dropping an 18-year-old in the hands of a group of people, and you feel terrific. But it was an experience that I basically never heard replicated at another university. I have to say that. When I
Mm.
say how was, you know, Mary's, you know, move-in weekend, fill in the blank, and it's special. And I think it sets the kids off and certainly the families off in a way that is really remarkable.
So years later, you received a call out of nowhere from then Father John, who was serving as president. I know I'm prompting you with questions of stories that I love that I've heard over the years. Could you share that story with those listening?
Sure. I'm laughing because it cracks me up every time. I answered my phone in my office. I said, "Hi, Jack Brennan." And this voice says, "I didn't expect to get you." And I said, "Well, what number did you dial?" In a not particularly friendly manner. And he tells me the number. I said, "Well, who is this?" And he said, "My name's John Jenkins. I work at Notre Dame." And, my heart goes through my teeth, right? There aren't many good options here. Either somebody's dead, flunking out, or in jail. And I'm not sure which is better, the flunking out of the jail part. And I said, "Listen, I answered my own phone." He goes, "Well, I didn't expect to have that." I said, "And I know who you are. What can I do for you?" And so the introduction was awkward, but the rest of it, Lou, set off, affirmed some things for me about Notre Dame and about Father John, but more importantly, just the beginnings of at least what I see in you and your colleagues on the leadership team. And his point was, he asked if I might come spend a little time at your PLC, your President's Leadership Council Dean's Retreat, to talk a little bit about how you try to keep driving forward when you're sort of going to new plateaus all the time. And spending a day with you guys was a remarkable experience for me. And I came back much as I tried to hire the tour guide that I had Will with. The kid was so impressive. Move-in weekend, the experiences all along, and then a chance to get to meet the people who make this happen was remarkable. And the idea that, look where we are, and not for any ego reasons, but we need to be better continually. Right. It's not common in academia. And it sent me again back from your retreat saying, this is a really unusual place and remarkable in many ways.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines from Father Ted is that God is never served well by mediocrity. And if we're going to do anything, we do it with excellence, do it to the very best of our abilities. And I remember your talk really well back, I don't know, it's been probably 15 years ago. Yeah. And, it was all about moving beyond complacency and hubris and staying hungry and humble and driven. And it's left a huge impact on many of us. If we could just shift a little bit, I mean, you've got this extraordinary track record at Vanguard and in the financial services industries. I would be remiss if I didn't ask for those looking on, for some free investment advice. What do you think about the current state? We're going to come back to Notre Dame stuff, but the current financial situation, the economy that we're in, and what might be some guideposts that you would share with our viewers for how to invest over the next 6 months?
So two background points. One, I never think about 6 months. Okay. Yeah. And most of us shouldn't, Lou. I know I'm not being flip. All of us, someone my age, some of your age, someone older than me, and people a lot younger than me have a long time to invest. It's why our endowment performance has been so outstanding. We think perpetually, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one risk people want to avoid is thinking about a tip from somebody or a thought or a prompt to do something in the short run. Second is we've been through an extraordinary period of time, right? Since the global financial crisis, returns on financial assets, but especially stocks, never mind venture and stuff that most people on this call don't have access to, but can through the endowment, if you will. If you just look, returns have been 70 to 100% higher than expectation over this 10 or 12 year window. Mm-hmm. And so I think people need to be very leery about either whether they're doing their financial plans and thinking, boy, I can save less because I'm going to earn 17 or 18 or 20% a year. that they should never assume that's the case. And so managing our own expectations, Lou, is one of the most important points I'd say to people right now. And then the second point I guess I'd make is be very leery of the noise that you hear about investing right now, whether it's, there's a whole mindset that trading is a good thing. Trading is not a good thing. Nobody's ever gotten rich trading who doesn't do it as a profession. They just haven't. It's a fact of life. All these, whether it's Bitcoin or this or that, meme stocks or NFTs, they're interesting to talk about, but for most of us, they're irrelevant. And it's hard to tune out the noise because nobody writes about, the great company that just compounds returns over decades, right? That's not glamorous. So for me, the most important advice I could offer people is manage your expectations around long-term realities. And second, be very leery that in late stages of a bull market, the people are convinced trees grow to the sky and they don't. And it's not a question of when a bull market ends. It's a question of how. And again, if you're thinking in long-term time frames, think about it strategically, as Mike Donovan and Scott Malpass before him have done so spectacularly for us as a university. Don't listen to the people who want to tell you what the futures are doing today.
Yeah. One of the things that I've admired in you, one of the many things, is that you've always talked about culture will eat the lunch of strategy every day. And the way you build a culture is you hire incredibly talented people of character, people who want to serve a mission that is greater than themselves. And one of the things I've loved about you is on your many visits to Notre Dame, when you hear a student give a great presentation, you're the first one in line afterwards offering that student a job. Absolutely. And I know you've done that for people that work at 7-Eleven, people that you've seen all across the board. And I think in that effort at talent acquisition, it's brilliant. And it's had a big imprint on me, and I know many others, in the way we go about recruiting talent and character as well. Why have you recruited so many Notre Dame students to Vanguard? What is it that you see in them that you find special?
You'll be happy to know it's multi-generational. Will's coming out Friday to give a talk, and he's going to come home with a person for his firm or two, I suspect, as well. Right. It's slowly becoming Notre Dame East in Stamford, Connecticut, which is great. But listen, you said it. It's values, right? There's a values match we found early on. For years we were a throw everybody in the pond and see who swims fastest place. And frankly, as I said, I mentioned a great colleague, Kathy Gabon, which was our head of HR, said we have to be differentiated and create some other programs. And by happenstance, really, Notre Dame people started bubbling up because of this values match about character, big intellect, low ego, very, very important, and an ability to grasp a mission. What a firm like Vanguard does, most financial firms, is not, curing cancer. And so you can teach most of what people need to do in a firm like that, but you can't teach character and values. And so when you see character and values, you grab it. And then you figure out how to, Will and I went up to West Point and did a couple of classes with some economics classes a couple of years ago. And I came home with a professor, fantastic young man, high character, reached out and said he was thinking about whether he was going to stay in or not. And we went back last week. There were a couple of cheap shots about stealing the professor as we gathered, but the reality was people said, "You're right. This is a guy that needed to end up in the right place." And so, values match, and you do it. You should never hire a resume. You should never hire a resume. When Jack Swarbrick is interviewing coaches, we did a thing together a couple of years ago, an interview, and I flipped it and said, "How do you hire coaches?" He said, "I start with the 5 things that simply will not change about Notre Dame." And if you want to put money in the player's shoes after the game, you're not coming here. Very important. And we've had a great run of coaches at Notre Dame through the same methods.
So one of the great things in life, I think, is in having children, is just when you feel like you've gotten kind of some sense of how to lead your life and what direction you're going. Your children take you in new directions, and obviously one of those new directions for you and Kathy has been being a part and key leaders of the Notre Dame family. Any anecdotes that you'd like to share, or any impacts of how Notre Dame has transformed you and Kathy as a couple, or any particular stories that you'd like to highlight that capture that?
We're the beneficiaries of the first story I'll tell you, which is remember we were 5-0 in 2002, Ty's first year, and I get a call at the office from a guy who went to Notre Dame who was shocked that Kathy and I aren't coming to Notre Dame Club of Philadelphia UND night. You couldn't believe it. And I said, well, we didn't go there. We're parents. He goes, you're part of the Notre Dame family. Mm-hmm. We went, and you would think we were, sixth generation Domers. Left a huge impression on us, Lou. Not anybody can say the XYZ family, but what you sensed there, we thought, aren't we lucky? Will is really a part of this. So, that's one. But one of the blessings of being in this role is, we host people for each football game and at other events and things. And the number of friendships we've made with people we would never have met, the stories we hear, what we've learned, the people who've been through cancer treatments and how they're swarmed by the Notre Dame family, I think has left an impression on us and made us better people in the best sense. Kathy's already a good person. I was a low bar. I needed a lot of help. I still need a lot of help. The other part about Notre Dame, which is so distinctive, is our deep commitment to the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church. Yeah. And so for us, it's in a sense a turbocharging where we get a chance to, try to be of small help to the world's greatest Catholic university. Mm-hmm. And the reverberations on our church, whether it's the thinking that goes on campus or the fact that we put kids into the adult world that still believe and go to church, which is far too rare today. That for us is something you just couldn't get anywhere else. And we consider it a blessing every day that there's nothing we can go to. You and we can go to a few masses over a celebration weekend. Yeah. And every time we leave, we think, what a gift. Look at this. Yeah. Look at this. So that's a few of the things, I could spend all day talking about it, but it's every once in a while we have to step back and catalog the good fortune that's come to us as individuals, not just we as a family, for having been welcomed into the Notre Dame family and seen what it's done for us and our children. Well,
I think it's worth mentioning that we have 272 Notre Dame clubs, about 210 domestic and the others international, all coordinated through the Alumni Association offices, but they're not called alumni clubs, exactly. Right? Because it is to welcome in parents and Subway alumni. Anybody who wants to be a part of this mission is invited in. And I don't think there's anything close to that any other university has across the country. And so I'm really glad that the leaders of the Philadelphia Club invited you and Kathy in early. And because a lot of people do feel, oh, I didn't go to school there, so I'm not part of the family. And in fact, they are all embraced and welcomed.
Remember we had sort of a fake Shamrock when Temple was undefeated and we were playing in Philly. Right. And we had an event on Friday afternoon. And I actually asked everybody I met at the event, are you a grad? Way less than half of the members of the club who were there that day. Right. And they all had a different affiliation and a decent number of Subway alums, but it was a great manifestation of how clever it is not to call it the alumni club, but call it the club, and how welcome they all felt. Yeah, you, Kathy, and I, and Father John and Ann Firth had the privilege of visiting the Gettysburg Club of Notre Dame, 110 members strong, 10 alumni. I didn't meet any of them. I met the 100. Yeah, exactly. You met the 100. Pretty amazing fact. And
what keeps me here, now 22 years going on, is that there's so many members of the Notre Dame family who make you want to be a better person, to live your faith more fully. You're continually humbled and inspired by their examples, by their core goodness, by their faith, their tenacity. You've had now, Jack, a little over 5 years. You're in your 6th year as chair of the Board of Trustees of this Notre Dame family, of this university, the governing board. I happen to think, and I know you won't say this, I know it's a great privilege and I know it's really fulfilling, but it's amazing how hard you work. It's amazing that in a volunteer capacity, all of the grief that you have to deal with, you and Kathy both. And it's something that those of us from within looking at you and your predecessors do not take for granted. It's a huge commitment of time and energy and ingenuity. What is it like to be chair? What are the responsibilities as you see it to be the chair of the board at Notre Dame, and not just for you, but collectively for the board as well?
Well, first, it's a huge privilege and honor. Just start with that. We have a fantastic board of trustees. It's diverse by any way you want to cut it. It's different ages, different ethnic backgrounds, alumni, and vast majority alumni, but parents as well, with a commonality around a deep, deep, deep love for Notre Dame and a deep commitment to the mission and to ensuring that we collectively can execute that mission. You said we're the governing board. That's what we are. We're not the management team. We are there we have sort of functional duties, whether it's, selecting the president or, a few of the senior officers and all of that. But our job is to be supportive, encouraging, and challenging to you and your colleagues on the leadership team. We approve strategies, we approve financial plans, we help, we're there to ensure that anything where there is an important impact on the university, we're there to ensure that it's done and executed as well as possible. So, but in many ways, it's the informal aspects, the less bylaw aspects that are important. This group of people brings an outside-in view to the university, which is very helpful, I think, to you and your colleagues. Really important. And the beauty of it is you never have to doubt whether they've got the university's best interests in mind, the students, the faculty, the staff, the community's best interests in mind. But I do think it's helpful. Much of the hard work gets done in the committees, and we did some realignment a few years ago where we now have one that's focused solely on undergraduate life, solely on research and graduate and faculty affairs. Very important. We have external affairs for you on public relations and development. And so what we hope is that those engagements with these highly accomplished people in other fields allows you to have a great sounding board and allows you to get this outside-in perspective that's valuable. That's the way I think of it. And my job is in a sense to be the conductor of a fabulous orchestra.
Well, and you've been, Jack, and you continue to be on some of the most impressive boards of for-profit and nonprofit companies in the world. How would you describe your Notre Dame board experience as distinct?
Well, first, the commitment to the mission is unparalleled, right? It's a distinctive mission. You've heard me talk a lot about how if you're a business geek, forget about, what we should be doing. You want to be Notre Dame. You want to be the one of the top institutions in this country that is distinguishable from all the rest because of our excellence in all the traditional academic aspects and our deep commitment to our Catholic faith and being a faith-based institution. So that differentiated position, if you will, in the marketplace makes this special, even if it wasn't for all the emotional attachments, because it's always interesting and arguably more challenging for leadership teams and thus the boards they work with to take that differentiated position. So that's one, Lou, that I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
And the second aspect, and you've heard me talk about this, the privilege I have at this stage of my life is to try to give back, or to put time into organizations that I choose to. Another stage, you do where you have to. And, to me, you only want to commit your time, energy to the best. And, I've given a talk around campus about the 6 things that I think matter, and I think Notre Dame has them all. And if it's not too long-winded, I'll just run them off for you, because I think sometimes we could take it for granted.
Yeah,
of us who love the place. One is just a clear and distinct mission and strategy. Bingo. Second thing that I always think of, and this is my training as a securities analyst 100 years ago, but my view has never changed. Second is great leadership. Never demonstrated more than in the last 18 months. Never. Okay. Third is great differentiated products are great organizations. Look at our students and the research and our faculty. Tremendous. They are. We already talked about why do we want to hire Notre Dame grads. Fourth is bulletproof financials. Stress tested, weren't sure we could pay the Wi-Fi bill in March of last year. And then the last 2 things that are the intangibles that you just don't see in all that many organizations, and it's why winners win. I talked about it with Father John and your colleagues, this never-ending desire to win and be great today and better tomorrow. Again, not for ego, but because nobody should strive for anything but being the best. And then the last is the passionate and loyal constituents and customers, the brands that we all know that, spark loyalty. Nobody better than Notre Dame. So you got the market positioning, but then I look under the covers, and I have the privilege of doing that, and say, in investment terms, this is a place you want to invest from a stewardship standpoint.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's a great way to kind of think about that in such a powerful 6-point framework. You mentioned the past 18 months. They have been incredibly challenging, and Notre Dame, again, under Father John's leadership, with your guidance and the board, it took a distinctive path, and I think a courageous path, but one that implies courage, was filled with a lot of risk. Can you kind of share some reflections from your perspective as board chair about the past 18 months and how Notre Dame managed COVID?
Oh, sure. It's you just think about how it started, Lou. Kids were on break. COVID was floating around a little bit as a theme, but while the students were on break, the idea of closing universities generically around the country accelerated at a pace like nothing I've ever seen in a broad base like this. And Father John and the team huddled, and initial reaction was, we're in South Bend, Indiana. We ought to be able to withstand this. But very quickly, they gathered the data, assessed the risks, and said, we got to take a different path. Kids aren't coming home; they're coming back to school. We've got to go virtual. We'll take an extra week to make it happen. That's all kind of lost in the fog of COVID. It's unbelievable in terms of speed and disciplined decision making, and then the execution to make the rest of the 2020 school year happen. And so that was one set of things that was very impressive. And again, it kind of gets lost in the broader, a whole year of this in the 2021 year. And then listen, you step back and you say, what went well, what didn't? What are the risks if we choose to reopen? And then Father John very boldly laid out the rationale. And, it all comes back in some ways to what makes Notre Dame special: the residentiality, the life in the residence halls, the interactions on the playing field, walking across the quads in the dining halls. Very importantly, the face-to-face interaction between teachers and students and researchers working together, all the things that make a Notre Dame education special. And you say, those are the rewards. What are the risks? And again, you're very much a part of all those conversations with eyes wide open, from May to August, planning brick by brick, physical things, procedural things, and then learning as we went. That's the other part of this, so it's all a risk reward trade-off, and the risks were seen to be manageable within the rewards. You had that spike in August, you started to think maybe it was a bad bet.
Yeah.
It was a bad bet. So I look at the whole thing. To me, when you come back and you think about health and welfare of the students and the faculty and the staff and the community, were always number one. And I think that touchstone was helpful to all of us as we thought about this. But then the other side of it was, what's a Notre Dame education? If we can deliver a Notre Dame education, which most people have capitulated on, let's do it. I've said it 100 times. I've never been prouder to be a fringe part of what you all accomplished. And, it is when you find out whether you have a great leadership team or not. It's easy. In rising tide, it's easy. And, you and I went on a couple of site visits to visit people who've given up their life to be testers or quarantine specialists or poking arms or helping people poke arms with vaccinations.
Yeah.
You say thank you, and they look at you like, why are you thanking me?
Right.
So anyways, long-winded, I apologize, but
No, this is great. Well, and the May 26th op-ed article that Father John penned in the New York Times really went against the grain, and it was entitled, "We're Reopening Notre Dame. It's Worth the Risk." A lot of people thought we were crazy. I got the calls. Are you trying to kill people? What's wrong with you? Nobody else is doing what you're doing. Do you think that you have more truth than others? What did you hear throughout this process from other board chairs? I'm sure you guys talk and exchange notes from time to time, but what kind of feedback, both good and bad, did you get along this path?
So, I got more jealousy, candidly, than criticisms. I think a lot of institutions followed the leader, whoever they happened to think was the leader. And when, particularly after Father John laid out his rationale here, and then it became viral and so on, people would reach in and say, we can't get there at our school. And with a sense of disappointment, frankly, and listen, there's a little group of board chairs who get together, and I don't know, it was probably early fall, maybe halfway through the fall last year. And the subject of being fully open didn't come up in the conversation. It was, we're 20% on campus, virtual, we're going to 30, and some of them were congratulating themselves about that. And no need for me to weigh in on that conversation, but I think people set expectations for what they should be doing for their students in a way that was just completely different than we had. And in private moments, people said, "Good on you. We hope this is a big success. I wish I was in your shoes, or I wish our leader and leaders were the same as what you have at Notre Dame."
Well, you're typically modest, and I know you played a huge role in supporting Father John and helping push him, again, from that outside in perspective, to make the courageous decisions that he did. And we're blessed to be in the position that we are today. Our students seem to be very grateful for the in-person class and campus experience. So 179 years ago, we were incredibly blessed, Jack, to have our founder, Father Soren, and we have this in our founding DNA, to have this vision not only to become one of the great universities in the land, but more importantly, one of the most powerful means for good in all of society. How do you see Notre Dame continuing to be, and developing even more so, to be a powerful means for good in a world that is deeply in need?
This is a dissertation topic at some level, right? And it's, I do come back to this, a force for good in the world is such a powerful mantra for us. I give us very high grades, and we can be better, as you just said, Lou, right? I think of a few things, and you could go institute by institute, or, the Keough School, our first new school in 100 years, which is clearly focused on making a difference in the world. So I won't go naming names around that, but I've been asked this question a lot. And, I think of three things really. First, and maybe most important, we send a couple of thousand young people out into the world having been shaped by Notre Dame every year. Think about that, the leverage inherent and in these young people who were held to a higher standard than most universities, who were selected because we think they share those values when they were admitted, and they go out into the world with an idea that they can be very successful, but they have to do something more than just be very successful. So I think of that as one of the most powerful forces. I don't know whether Father Soren was thinking about that. Our deep commitment to research and becoming an even better university around research. Again, if you watch, just look at what do we fight for ads on TV, right? And if you get a chance to get exposed to the research programs and where our fabulous faculty is spending their time, is just incredible. And the third thing I would say is, in a sense, and this sounds sort of trite, I guess, at some level, but being Notre Dame, right? When the world needs a Notre Dame as a beacon of hope, a university that accomplishes what other great universities accomplish, but does it incredibly loudly and proudly, saying, and we do it, and we're Catholic, we're faith-based, we're about values. No one else does that. And so I think that's part of how we make a difference in the world already. People know who we are, what we stand for, what we're trying to accomplish. And there's 1,000 things underneath, and you just get, you raise money for them, and you look at what people accomplish. I think Father Soren's proud. And knowing enough about Father Soren, he's saying, get going, you can do more.
That's right.
That's why 179 years later, this place is what it is. And, we've been so blessed to have leaders that describe that. And it's never about them. It's always about making the world a better place, as you said, in a world that desperately needs our help.
Well, I want to add my voice to the chorus of thank yous to you and Kathy. You're flying out here today. You're going to be in here for another football weekend. You haven't missed a football weekend, and going on 6 years here now as board chair, and you're out here for 3 trustee meetings a year and so many other occasions, commencement and welcome weekends and so many other special events. It's almost unfathomable the amount of time and energy and talent that you bring to this role. So on behalf of all of us, we can never thank you enough, but just know how grateful we are for the impact that you have on this institution. And if you don't mind, we're gonna close with a Hail Mary. I want to tee up that we're coming now every other week, and we're going to be joined by our new Vice President for Student Affairs and a member of the Congregation of Holy Cross, Father Jerry Olinger, and we'll talk about the state of kind of student affairs 2 weeks from now. It's October 13th, again, noon Eastern Standard Time. And as we close, we're going to have, after our Hail Mary, a video promoting a musical festival that we're going to hold next week on campus, October 7th at 7 p.m., that you'll all be invited to join virtually. It'll feature more than 12 different student groups, over 500 musicians, and they're going to be singing in the stadium under the lights that evening. And again, it's another way to participate virtually in the spirit of Notre Dame. So together, thank you all for being with us, whether you're in your workplace or in your homes. Please join us as we close before this video with a prayer to Our Lady. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thank you. Thanks again, Jack. God bless.
Thanks a lot. Go Irish.
Notre Dame Music Festival right here under the lights at iconic Notre Dame Stadium.